Second World War in the Pacific was truly savage, marked by massive casualties and terrible atrocities, and only ended when atomic bombs levelled two Japanese cities. Strategically, though, it was very simple. It began when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December 1941, after which their forces surged through the Pacific, brushing aside the feeble resistance of the US and the old colonial powers, though the US Navy did manage to inflict some initial defeats on the Japanese. America spent the first half of 1942 switching its massive industrial base to wartime production, and then began to push the Japanese back, island by island. It was slow but relentless, and on each island Japanese resistance became more fanatical, until dropping nuclear bombs seemed like a way to end the conflict with less loss of life. Even then, it took a week for the Japanese to finally surrender. The Japanese had originally taken the Philippines in 1942, with heavy American losses and the infamous Bataan Death March inflaming American public opinion. But by August 1944, the Philippines were next in the US advance. The Japanese knew what was coming, and as part of their preparations, they moved their merchant fleet from Manila Bay to Coron for safety. But an airstrike on the morning of the 24th of September sank a dozen military ships before the US continued on to retake the Philippines and then move on again, ever closer to the Japanese homeland. Left behind was what is today recognised as a world-class wreck diving location, which includes the wrecks of the Akitsushima, Iraku and Okikawa Maru. Seaplanes have been around almost since the aeroplane was invented, and they were particularly useful in the vast open spaces of the Pacific, where their long flying range and independence from land-based airstrips made them very useful. But seaplanes have to be looked after like any other aeroplane, so the Japanese Navy commissioned seaplane tenders like Akitsushima. At 5,000 tons and almost 400 feet long, she had room for large amounts of spare parts, aeroplane fuel, torpedoes and bombs. Launched in April 1942, she was damaged several times in US aerial attacks, including the attack on Truk, and was repaired and refitted before being sent to Manila and then on to Coron. The wreck now lies on her port side, largely intact and with lots of opportunities for wreck penetration. But armies march on their stomachs, as various military leaders have pointed out, so keeping them properly fed is essential to any strategy. Delivering that food overseas is usually the job of merchant vessels, but the Japanese Navy also commissioned supply ships like the Iraku. Completed in 1941, she was able to carry enough stores to feed 25,000 troops for 2 weeks, and she was used to carry those supplies to Japanese troops all around the Pacific. In 1944, she was torpedoed and badly damaged by the US submarine Sea Dragon, repaired, went back into service, and ended up in Coron, where she was sunk. Her wreck is now largely intact and upright, though a bit deeper than some. Merchant ships, though, were also essential. So when the war began, the Japanese started a program of building ships to a standard plan across different yards, a bit like the Liberty ships of the Allies. Okikawa Maru was one of at least 19 wartime standard merchant tanker 1TLs, each of them able to carry almost 14,000 tons of oil fuel. Okikawa Maru herself entered service in 1943 and carried fuel around the Pacific until she was sent to Coron and met her end. The largest of the wrecks, she's a little shallower than most and offers divers the pretty much unique opportunity to enter the engine room by swimming up the prop shaft tunnel from the stern of the wreck. I'll be diving these wrecks and more in 2027, and if you'd like to join me, you'll find contact details for scuba travel on screen and in the description below.